The decision was never absent. It was simply unfinished. In the beginning, there was time. Not an abstract idea. Actual time. Mornings that felt open. Evenings without urgency. He did not feel lost. He felt suspended. There were options. Nothing dramatic. Nothing extreme. Paths that looked similar from a distance. Each one acceptable. None demanding immediate clarity. When asked what he wanted, he answered honestly, "I'm still thinking." That answer worked for years. He believed that certainty arrived on its own. That one day the right feeling would settle. Quietly. Without effort. So he waited. Work happened by proximity. Not by choice. A position opened. He was available. It felt reasonable. Relationships followed the same pattern. People stayed because nothing pushed them away. Conversations about the future ended gently. Later was always an option. There was no pressure inside him. Only a soft resistance. A reluctance to narrow things down. He told himself that staying flexible was wise. That committing too early could be a mistake. That observing was safer than deciding. Life continued. Not fast. Not slow. Days filled themselves. Bills were paid. Plans were mentioned, then postponed. He did not feel dissatisfied. He also did not feel aligned. The absence of a clear stance did not feel like a problem. It felt neutral. Temporary. At least, that is how it seemed then. The decision was still forming. Or so he believed. Over time, waiting stopped feeling temporary. It became a background state. Like noise you no longer notice. He adjusted to it without effort. Days arranged themselves around what already existed. Work stayed the same. Not because it was right. Because it did not demand a decision. Small changes appeared. A new task. A slightly different role. Each one close enough to the previous version. None required him to say yes or no. He accepted by default. There were moments when clarity came close. Brief thoughts. Late at night. Early mornings. Questions without urgency. What if this isn't it? What if this is enough? He did not push those thoughts away. He let them pass. Like weather. People around him began to define themselves. Not loudly. Not all at once. But gradually. They spoke about plans. Moves. Commitments. Changes that sounded settled. He listened. He nodded. He asked practical questions. When asked again what he wanted, his answer changed slightly. "I'm fine where I am." It was true. In a narrow sense. Comfort replaced curiosity. Not comfort as pleasure. Comfort as predictability. There was no inner conflict. Only a quiet narrowing. Choices were no longer open fields. They became corridors. Still wide enough to walk. Too narrow to turn around easily. He noticed time differently now. Not as abundance. As sequence. Weeks repeated themselves. Months followed familiar patterns. Nothing was wrong. Nothing stood out. The absence of direction stopped feeling noticeable. It blended into routine. He was not avoiding a decision anymore. He was living inside the pause. And the pause no longer felt like waiting. At some point, effort began to feel unnecessary. Not because things were easy. Because movement felt optional. He no longer considered alternatives. Not consciously. They simply stopped appearing. When something ended, it was replaced with something similar. A colleague left. He took on more work. It made sense. Questions about change felt abstract. Like discussions about distant places. Interesting. Unrelated. He noticed a shift in how others spoke to him. Less curiosity. More assumption. They referred to his life as settled. Used words like stable. Consistent. He did not correct them. Stability became a shield. Not chosen. Accepted. Inside, there was no strong resistance. No pull in another direction. Only a mild awareness that something had closed. He still imagined different versions of his life. Briefly. Without detail. These thoughts had no weight. They did not demand action. They existed without consequence. Decisions now came pre-shaped. Forms already filled. Paths already drawn. He signed where expected. He agreed when asked. There was relief in that. Less responsibility. Less exposure. Time continued to pass. Uneventfully. He marked it with practical milestones. Rent increases. Project deadlines. Calendar reminders. The future was no longer something to approach. It arrived on its own. He adapted as it did. The feeling of choice faded quietly. Not as loss. As absence. An absence, when consistent, stops being noticed. The first cracks were subtle. They did not announce themselves. They appeared as delays. Hesitations that had no clear cause. He noticed them when decisions were required. Small ones. Harmless on the surface. He took longer to respond. Not because he was unsure. Because nothing felt necessary. Opportunities appeared occasionally. Not dramatic. Just slightly different. A role in another department. A move that required explanation. A change that needed a reason. He declined without framing it as a choice. It's not the right time. The phrase sounded reasonable. It always had. But time no longer felt open. It felt accounted for. He began to sense effort in places that once felt neutral. Meetings. Conversations. Plans made weeks ahead. Not fatigue. Something closer to inertia. People around him adapted again. They stopped offering alternatives. Stopped asking. They assumed his answer in advance. He felt a mild irritation at that. Brief. Unexpressed. There was a growing awareness of repetition. Not boredom. Recognition. He could predict most days before they happened. Not precisely. Enough. The idea of change felt heavy. Not frightening. just dense. It required explanation, justification, energy. Staying required none of that. So he stayed. The earlier belief returned briefly. That clarity might still arrive. Fully formed. He did not chase it. Waiting felt familiar. Reliable. And familiarity had become its own reason. There was no single moment of realization. No clear point where something ended. Only a gradual shift in how he located himself in time. The future felt shorter now. Not urgent. Just closer. He noticed it in simple thoughts. How long he had been here. How long things had stayed the same. These observations carried no panic. They were factual. When asked about plans, he answered with structures, schedules, existing commitments. Desire was no longer part of the explanation. He did not feel regret. That would have required comparison. He had none. Other lives appeared distant. Not unreachable. Just unrelated. He understood that many choices were already made. Not actively. By continuation. This understanding did not disturb him. It clarified the shape of things. The waiting he once practiced had solidified. It had edges now. Wait. What remained was maintenance. Adjustments within a fixed outline. He continued to function. He continued to respond. He continued to meet expectations. There was no sense of failure. No feeling of loss. Only a quiet recognition. The decision had never taken shape. And in its absence, a life had.